I finally built the courage to review I sat on a panel at the Alberta Beekeepers Commission a little while ago. A president's panel, you should call it. The presidents of BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and then myself from Manitoba. Just speaking about industry issues and such. Now, to go out to Alberta, it was in Edmonton, to attend this conference and take part up on stage, but life threw me a wrench and I had to cancel my planned trip out there. That being household sewer issues. The evening before we were to leave, we had a sewer backup and spent most of the night cleaning that mess up, and then most of the next morning fixing the sewer issue because I couldn't leave the house. Well, I have 5 kids, so I can't leave the house without an operational sewer. By the time I got that going after lunch, it was a 16-hour drive, so I was not ready to take on a long drive to attend a convention to sit on a panel. So I pulled the pin, unfortunately, and backed out on that convention. But they harnessed me in to speak on Zoom, so I was still on the screen and I was still able to participate, so that was good. I think it went fairly well. I couldn't see, like I'm talking into a screen, so I couldn't see the audience and how they reflected what I was saying. But I've just built the courage to watch that video now. What I do is when I make my own videos, or when I'm sitting on panels and I listen to myself speak and just kind of criticize the way or critique the way I talk, how I present myself, how I express my views and opinions, and if it's in a clear, coherent, and find all the flaws and try to work on those flaws at all times. And I'm scared to watch this one. It's been up for a couple weeks now, but I'm just so curious to see how I presented myself, because I think I was a little bit energized. My pilot light was on and it didn't take much to get that flame going. So we were talking about industry issues. I think I dove right in there, called one guy out. Didn't call him out, but called him to the microphone to speak on a very touchy issue. And I'm pretty sure he won't buy me another beer because of that. But he's a professional fellow. I know him. I think he was understanding what I was getting at. But I could have maybe, those types of situations, and we'll watch it here, that I could maybe present myself in a different manner. I have a lot of trouble with tone. When I'm thinking, I'm speaking, I speak what I think, I'm blunt, straight to the point. And sometimes that tone comes across the wrong way. And throughout this entire process of doing all this kind of stuff, as I'm watching myself and critiquing myself, I notice it's like the pendulum swings. I go from one side where I get really argumentative, and then I notice the conversation degenerates, and then it swings the other way to where I'm too passive, and it just makes for a very dull, boring conversation. And then it swings back, and I'm trying to bring that pendulum to rest right in the center, where I'm providing the context to make it interesting for people to listen and then engage into the conversation issues, but not be argumentative where things degenerate, and not to be so passive that it becomes boring and not useful for anybody. So I've got a long ways to perfect that, but I think I'm getting closer as that swings back and forth, especially through conflict. So with that said, might as well dive in to see, and I'll put pause as we go through and just comment on what I'm listening to as we go throughout this panel discussion.
So hopefully you guys all had a good cup of coffee and had some snacks and some good visits. We're going to move into our panel speaking here today. And our panelists today that we have with us come from the different prairie provinces in British Columbia, including British Columbia. The first panelist that I'd like to introduce is Jeremy Olthoff. Many of you guys know Jeremy Olthoff. He's the owner of Tees Bees. He's been the president for the Alberta Beekeepers Commission and been on the board for the Alberta Beekeepers Commission for the past 6 years. Jeremy has his own personal operation in Tees, Alberta. He's my closest neighbor. He runs Tees Bees, and he has grown his operation from just under 3,000 hives to 4,500 production units. And typically, in any given year, he's putting 1,000 nukes into winter to fill the holes that are generated every spring. And then next to him, we have Jeff Lee. Jeff Lee comes to us from British Columbia. He runs a beekeeping operation, 600 hives in Creston, BC. He's got about 12 years of experience as a beekeeper, pollinating the orchards in Creston, producing honey, doing wholesale honey sales and retail honey sales. He's been with the BCHPA on the board there for the past 10 years, and he is their current first vice chair. Heather Higo, the president, Hugo wasn't able to make it here. She's got a family issue that she has to deal with. So we like to welcome Jeff Lee. Next to Jeff, we have Nathan Wendell. Nathan is the president of the Saskatchewan Beekeepers Development Corporation. Now, Nathan, he's got quite a wide, varied background, having studied at university as a clinical psychologist. He's worked in the States for 10 years. In 2016, he moved back to McNutt, Saskatchewan, where he is a partner in Wendell Honey. Wendell Honey runs approximately 4,200 production hives, 60% of which are in Saskatchewan, 40% are in Manitoba. And this winter, they put 2,500 nukes into winter in anticipation for next year. He has been the president of the Saskatchewan Beekeepers Development Corporation for the past 4 years, and we'd like to welcome Nathan as well. Now, we have on the screen there, and this is how I first learned about Ian Stepler. I had my employees come up to me and sit there and say, hey, I was watching a YouTube video, and this guy says we should do it this way. I first had the pleasure of meeting Ian at the BCHPA meeting this year. And Ian comes out of Manitoba. He is their current president. He is only able to join us today by video virtually because he's got some septic issues. And or at least that's what I've been told.
That bugger. I'm not sure if Ron did that on purpose, but I didn't catch it at the time. But I let my kids watch my introduction here because I thought it was pretty cool. And when Ron introduced me, mentioning my absence because of septic issues, because I have household septic issues, but my kids immediately burst into laughter because that means septic issues. This is in front of a packed house, and that's maybe where we got some of the chuckle from. So I'm pretty sure he didn't do that on purpose, but that's how it'll come across. It's the first time I've been introduced in that manner.
Ian, welcome. Our moderator today is going to be Adoni Malathopoulos. Now, most of you will know Adoni. He used to work up in Beaver Lodge with Steve Purnell. He's cut his teeth on how to be a beekeeper in the Peace Country. If you can keep bees in the Peace Country, you can keep bees anywhere. In 2016, Adoni has had enough of the Canadian cold and decided to move to Oregon State, where he now works in bee research with the USDA or with the university. And coming back here to Edmonton, he's realized why he's not going to retire in Canada. And from here on in, I'd like to welcome Adoni. Please give all our panelists and our moderator a big round of applause. And I'm going to turn it over to Adoni.
Great. Thanks, Ron. Okay, so here we are. We're having this panel is on the focus of beekeeping in Western Canada. As Ron mentioned, I've learned my beekeeping in BC and Alberta, but I moved away to Oregon. So I have familiarity with the key issues we'll be talking about today, but I also have some distance. So you can think of me as a benign Martian who's genuinely interested, thanks, Neil, in getting all the issues on the table today. So we have 5 questions that were developed with the panelists. We're going to go through each question one at a time, followed by the panelists' responses. And if there's opportunity, your responses at the mic as well. My goal is to get through all 5 questions and try to see if we have enough time at the end for the panelists to have closing remarks. I want to ask the panelists, but also all of you, to be concise and direct, be respectful, but be blunt. I want to try and bring this conversation I may have to bring the conversation to a close after each question just to keep us on time, but hopefully this is going to lead to some productive solutions that can move our industry ahead. So I'm going to start with the first question. What are the biggest challenges, threats that beekeeping in your provinces are facing with regards to the sustainability of their businesses? How might they best be addressed by provincial or national organizations through research or advocacy? Anybody want to start with this question? Maybe Ian, we'll start with you just to test your mic at the same time.
Okay, am I coming through?
Yeah, you sound good.
Okay, well, I appreciate you making the effort to involve me with the panel here today. I'd much rather be sitting up there with the guys talking bees and doing what I'm doing here now, dealing with life. It's kind of interrupted our Christmas shopping too. But at any rate, yeah, it's a good question. I think you're asking in regards to what is our beekeepers' major challenges within Manitoba here. And like I would hear from many beekeepers reply as mites. I mean, if it wasn't for the bloody mite, I think we would be operating much different honeybee operations. It's just this drain on being able to keep our stock productive. And that leads into issues, right? Like this last summer, or this last spring, I should say, we had quite a severe losses across Manitoba with honeybees, directly either related to weather or mites or whatever. And a lot of beekeepers found them short on replacement stock. And that was to the detriment. I mean, I think what it's done is amplified one of the problems with some of the way we run our operations. We can run all the checks and balances we can. Like I produce nukes, I cover my own losses, I raise my own queens, I do all this stuff sustainably and reaching out to other producers. But you come a year like we had this last year, and it just shows a flaw that we don't have a real actual backstop to handle these catastrophes that come every once in a while, and it leaves beekeepers short in stock. And because of that, it just amplifies the issues. And I think we need to re-examine maybe some of the processes we have going on here to be able to make sure that we can stay in business when we run into variability as such. So maybe I'll hand it back off to you.
So just like my manner, I go and jump right into the deep end right off the start. A very controversial subject. Listed the obvious answer to the question being colony health. I mean, directly related to the varroa mite. If we had healthy bees, we wouldn't have to be searching for alternatives to be able to replace all the losses that we experience from time to time. And then dove straight into the packaged bee issue. For those who are tuning in to this, the border from the United States into Canada for packaged bees has been closed for well before I got into beekeeping. Like it's been closed for 36 years, I guess they're telling me. And it just created this huge shift, this transition from a reliance on American stock to help us perpetuate our businesses up in Canada to a point where we needed to focus on maintaining the stock within our operations ourselves. So that shift in sustainable management happened overnight. Is either you accepted it and transitioned, adopted, or you went out of business. And there's beekeepers who went out of business. A lot of beekeepers struggled to make that transition. But over 36 years, we've been able to, and the border is closed because of pest issues, right, disease issues. So over the number of years, we've been able to access replacement stock for losses from other countries to be able to mitigate these loss events, and at the same time manage our pest issues. And the conversation going on right now within Canada is, why are we sourcing these replacement hives or replacement packages from other countries, whereas over the time period of these last 36 years, our pest issue has maybe become more similar than it was before. And when we're just speaking of packaged bees, not bees on comb, we're just talking packaged bees, and specifically beekeepers have honed in into this area where we bring in U.S. queen stock for breeding. And I think there's like 250 to 300 or 400,000, or maybe not that many, about 250,000 queens come in from the mainland U.S. And the focus is on that area where the protocols are in place, generate the packages of bees from the same hives or operations that are generating those queens for us, just to provide us with another point of accessing more stock to be able to help us transition these extraordinary conditions like we experienced last year, where there wasn't enough coming in from offshore to actually meet the demand for the bees of the losses experienced across Canada. Highly controversial, polarizing, creates a lot of conflict. You have associations which are like-minded and like on one side of the opinion, and the associations seem to function fairly well, and you have associations on the other side of like-minded opinion that seem to function fairly well. Then you have associations like ours in Manitoba where we seem to be split right down the middle, and there's just a continual conflict and fight in regards to this, and it doesn't matter. It's very unhealthy. It just can't seem to take a step forward because there's always fighting. The number one issue seems to be around this. So, here I am, dive right into the deep end, right?
Great. Jeremy, why don't we move down, you, Jeff Lee, and then Nathan.
Okay. Yeah. The mites is the huge concern. Ian sort of touched on that already. The one thing that really worries me, and one that, maybe we don't have control over, is, the price of honey is curing a lot of problems right now. But if that goes away, that's what, what worries me the most. And yeah, what do you do about it? But, keep promoting honey. But if we had the losses that we had this year without that price of honey, there would be a lot of guys going out of business. So that's what scares me. But yeah, and then dealing with these mites, we just have to adapt. And I'm lucky enough to have a good support system where I could recover, more or less, and stay going after losing close to 70%. The guys that don't have that is, hopefully, it's one thing I love about this industry is we're more or less close knit. We fight a lot, but we rally together as well. So it's one thing that when I started as president, that was my huge goal, was to try and keep the provinces connected. Try and collaborate as much as possible. It's not always easy, but that's why we have panels like this, trying to keep the lines of communication open and collaborate. So I'll pass it.
Thanks a lot. And just hold the mic a little bit closer as you're talking, just for.
So in answer to the question, ours is very much similar. It is, of course, mites, but just to quickly give you an understanding of what BC's beekeeping industry is, we're probably about 75% are small scale or hobbyist. We have some large producers, not like in Alberta, and in the national context, we rank quite low in terms of honey production. So the issues that we have are amplified by the fact that a lot of our small scale or hobbyist beekeepers tend to be they're not as adept at understanding some of the issues, and so the education component for us is quite key. This last year, we ended up stepping up a tech transfer program, which is designed to try and overcome some of those issues. So what we face in British Columbia, we follow along behind some of the problems that you've had. If we had 50% dead outs and non-viable colonies, we would be in the same, we'd have the same concerns. I actually have that experience because in 2018, I lost 87% of my colonies and had to rebuild. So the pain is quite acute. For us in British Columbia, what we're now trying to do is to jump that education gap and try and start to build our industry in a way that will be competitive and sustainable with other national and provincial organizations. This month and a half ago, our provincial agriculture ministry announced a sector assessment of the beekeeping industry, and that's long time in coming. It's something that we think will help to perhaps fill in some of the gaps that you might be seeing in BC participation with other beekeepers.
We have two mics, but we're just going to use one. So I think that the challenges that have already been mentioned are the same in Saskatchewan. Bee health, and specifically varroa mites, and the management of those mites to maintain our colony health is the biggest challenge facing Saskatchewan beekeepers. We were fortunate this past year that although we had high losses, they weren't quite as high as some of the other provinces. But we're really focused on, in terms of addressing those problems, research. The Saskatchewan beekeepers have made what for us is a very large contribution to in-province research through our tech transfer team and industry partners, Dr. Simcoe from the Western College of Veterinary Medicine and his bee lab, and working with Jeff Wilson through the Provincial Apiculture's office. We're kind of all in on research into bee health. Dr. Nasser, our tech transfer lead, is working on the continued development of new miticides, and we're putting in proposals about examining the use of oxalic more widely as we're losing effectiveness with Apivar. And in addition to that, the stock replacement that was mentioned, that of course was an issue for beekeepers who experienced big losses in Saskatchewan this year. As a province, Saskatchewan is highly invested in domestic stock replacement. And it was encouraging going into this fall. We still are sending into winter 10% less production hives than we had last winter. But our nuke levels have come up. And so a typical year in Saskatchewan, we carry enough nucleus colonies to replace about 30% of our production colonies. Going into this winter, the reported numbers were that we're carrying closer to 40 or 42% of nucleus colonies, could replace 42% of our production hives. So I think producers have really doubled down on the domestic stock replacement and trying to build that within their own organizations, and then as an association supporting that within the country, within the province rather, so that we can meet everyone's stock replacement needs.
Well, thank you so much. We have time for one quick question or comment from the floor on this question of biggest challenges. If there's none, I will move on, but just know after each of the rounds, there'll be an opportunity. Okay, seeing none, let's move on. This came up in many of Samantha brought it up, but also you've brought it up, the issue of the tech transfer teams. And the question is, are the tech transfer teams best utilized doing applied research or hive monitoring? I think this question came up in Samantha's presentation. Do they work collaboratively across provincial boundaries enough, and should they? And what do you envision that looking like? Maybe, Nathan, we'll move all the way down the same way.
Sure. Thank you. So I can speak to the technology adaptation program in Saskatchewan, which is again led by Dr. Medhat Nasser and is heavily research focused. There is some extension work, of course, and some outreach. In last year, we had 4 projects going on under Medhat, which involved the continued development of the novel miticides, a 2-year project focused on the resurgence of EFB in the province of Saskatchewan and how we can manage that, a 2-year project looking at queen quality. So queens raised in the province of Saskatchewan, looking at their sperm counts and their viability and queen size, and trying to develop a set of best management practices and comparing those to queens from other provinces and from international sources. And then a 1-year project looking at using unhealthy brood assay to develop a way to test for varroa sensitive hygienic behavior in the field. So that's what Saskatchewan uses their tech adaptation team for. But that's our provincial direction. That's where we're putting our money. And I think in terms of the other provinces, that's really dependent on what their vision is and what their direction is and what their resources are for how they're using their individual tech transfer teams. I do think that there could be increased communication. I'm not certain what the level of communication is. I was encouraged earlier to see a slide talking about developing structure for increasing that communication and collaboration between the provinces. I think we always benefit from sharing ideas and sharing resources, pulling those together.
Has it just before we move off, has there been discussion, especially with BC coming on board, all the provinces having tech transfer? Has there been any kind of discussion at the Development Commission about how to better integrate the tech transfer programs?
We've not necessarily discussed it on a provincial level. I believe it's being discussed at the sustainability subcommittee as one of the primary objectives moving forward.
Yeah, in answer to that, we're new in the sense that we just stood up our TTP this last year. And so in answer to the question, is it more monitoring than it is applied research? At this stage, a lot of it is getting our feet on the ground. So it is monitoring. We are looking to try and get some baseline information from our beekeepers. However, we are doing applied research, and there is some of that. I mean, I'm part of a collaborators project with Nuria Morfin, who is our tech transfer lead on varroa resistance monitoring. One of the projects that we are trying to get going this next year is also answering the question that some of you have already heard about, which is how serious is this issue of amitraz resistance? Is it sustained? Is it a problem that our beekeepers are going to experience? I know from my own personal operations that amitraz effectivity seems to be declining in my use this last year. So it's a problem that we see that we know other provinces are having. So our tech transfer program is looking at that as a potential. One of the things that we are discussing, and because we're new into the game, perhaps we have a little bit different lens to look at or look through, is that there are a lot of these tech transfer programs that have projects that are very similar to one another. So what we are looking at is how can we make sure that all of the tech transfer programs are working in collaboration with each other, and so that we're not spending scarce dollars duplicating research that doesn't need to be duplicated. So, I know that Nuria and our executive have been discussing how we can reach out to the other provinces that have tech transfer programs to make sure that we are working together. And I mean, one of the areas, as a good example, just as the discussion that came up a few days ago, is for those provinces where they're finding that they have beekeepers with significantly high losses. We would like to know what are the baseline reasons for that. Are there things that our tech transfer leads can do to help to solve some of these issues? So sort of the sharing of information, both among the tech transfer programs and also among the beekeepers who are being greatly affected by these kinds of losses, I think is where we see some of this collaborative posturing being beneficial.
So yeah, this is one that being on our tech transfer steering committee, that I've struggled with a little bit, because we're primarily colony monitoring, and I've always been a huge supporter of not just the individual monitoring, but it's that collective data that you have. It's like we used to have the national survey. I think the value of that is sometimes, maybe not stressed enough. And I think it's a huge benefit to the industry just to have that data, so we know what's going on. What are we facing? When we all, do our own testing, we find out what we have in our own industry or operations, but just sort of that collective data on what's going on in the industry as a whole, to address it. In terms of collaborating, the one thing, I mean, I'll maybe just throw it out there. Should the tech transfer have a seat at CHG? Should there be is that a way to communicate, nationally. Yeah, thoughts on that?
All right, Ian. And also for those of you who are online, you can post your questions in the app as well. And remember, we'll have an opportunity for question and comments after Ian.
Yeah, I'm getting a little bit far from the question, but what I'll do is I'll just kind of explain what we're doing here in Manitoba. We're new to this. We're only in for a couple or few years, and we're just getting this program up and running and trying to get things going. The whole tone behind what we're trying to achieve here in Manitoba, like we don't have a lot of money, plain and simple. So we're feeding off government to help us sustain this program, and we're reaching out to other industry associations to help provide us with some of the cash we need to be able to run this program. So we're doing everything we can within our means. What we're trying to do is provide some technical support for beekeepers on the ground, right? And that's something I think is lacking within our industry, is that, independent technical support that beekeepers sometimes need, that feedback, some reassurance, or just some guidance in a lot of ways. Much like what we have in our grain farm and cattle farm, we actually hire an agronomist to help us with the chemistry within our cropping management, and within our cattle operation, we have all these feed companies and vet services to help us figure out all these issues and diagnose the problems. I think we're lacking that within the beekeeping industry, and it just leaves beekeepers a lot of the time wondering what the hell is going on, right? So we're just trying to provide a program to assist beekeepers with some of the support. The other thing that we are really ambitious on, and we want to try to move forward, is trying to translate some of that academic knowledge that we're always inundated with. And how do you take that and bring it down to the producer level? Because I think there's a disconnect between all that investment and all that brilliance and what's actually coming down to the beekeepers level to actually help us within our operations. Like, where is that? Right now, we're like, we've run a Apivar resistant test because we figure we're having trouble with Apivar. And we're asking ourselves, well, what's next? What are we supposed to do next, right? And with all this investment into our industry, you think we'd have this figured out by now, and we don't. The producers are just scratching their heads asking, where are we going to go from here, right? And whether this program's going to be able to help us, but maybe this is the channel that we can use as beekeepers to maybe handle this problem ourselves, is take some of that and bring it down to the producer level to help us with their issues right now, what's going on right ground level. Like, there's beekeepers, like, we're forced to take our matter into our own hands in a lot of ways. Like, we're using some off-label products, let's say oxalic acid glycerin for an extended use. It's not registered right now. So how many beekeepers across the country are using an off-label product because we don't have any other choice? That's not acceptable. We need help. We need to have a regulatory system to come in to help us catch up to what we need done within our operations. And maybe using these tech transfer programs might help assist some of that catch up to help beekeepers bring what we need down into our operations. So anyways, I don't think I answered your question, but that's just what's going on within Manitoba anyways.
Like I say, that pilot light was lit and that flame started to burn when I talked about this is something I truly believe in, is just creating more service for beekeepers to help us do our jobs better, right? As we try to advance, as we try to evolve and in a way catch up to the rest of agriculture, we need a little bit of assistance on that. And we're scrambling. We don't have a lot of investment into our industry, notably because we're not a big payback, right? It's not like we're the grain industry. We're spending tens of thousands of dollars per farm on seed products and chemical products and different ways of managing our lands and equipment. We don't have that within the beekeeping industry because the payback isn't there. So this is in a sense where our industry has to help ourselves, and this is where we need to reach out to government to provide some assistance on helping us sustain our operations, figure out some of these issues. And also, this is maybe the channel where we can tap into other industry associations to help us with these situations, provide some of the baseline funding needed to help us with that investment and come up with some of these answers. because we do provide a huge benefit to agriculture itself. And it's nice to be able to see agriculture recognize that and invest into that and seeing us as being part of that picture.
Can I just, in answer to Ian's point about the need for more of a national approach, and Jeremy's question about whether it's time for the tech transfer programs to have a seat on the CHC, I think that all of that is necessary. I think that having a unified voice that is representative to the government on the issues that we're facing. I mean, what's that old saying about a squeaky wheel gets the grease, or many hands make light work, or rising tide floats all boats. It's all the same message here, which is that if we do this independently, if we do this by ourselves, if we do it within our own association and not with respect to the issues that other folks around the country are having, then I think we lose. And I think that's the message that can come out of this, is that collaboratively we all have to work together and be willing to listen to the problems that the others have. And I mean, about 7 or 8 years ago, we had a PMRA specialist come to one of our meetings in Kamloops, and we thought we were going to get a lesson about proper use of the pesticides or the miticides or the things that were available. And what we got was a lesson about what happens if you don't use the systems the way they're designed and approved, that you get fined, you get shut down, you get in trouble with the government. And it was actually a fairly negative response to what we were asking from the government, which is assist us, help us understand what it is we need to do to keep our bees healthy.
Neil.
What is the relationship with the tech transfer teams and programs with CAPA?
So this is a question
that they are members. Most of the tech transfer teams, a large percentage, are members of CAPA. It's a national body. What is that relationship, and can it be used as a national binding agent for those?
I see a former CAPA president right behind you.
Yeah, I thought I would tackle. Okay, I'm short. I thought I would tackle this one since our current president isn't here. Our current president is Ernesto Guzman, but all of the tech team leads are members of CAPA. Nuria, for example, is the secretary on the executive of CAPA. So they are heavily involved in CAPA. And CAPA also has a technology transfer committee, which is a permanent committee within CAPA for them to, meet and discuss. It's an avenue for them to get together, and they produce a tech transfer team report annually, which is part of the CAPA proceedings.
So the question is, how can they be used to collaborate with what? Together.
How can CAPA be used to foster collaboration? Is that?
Basically, there is a huge benefit in not duplicating research and in sharing research. This is applied research done by CAPA members. It's a national body. I'm suggesting that membership of our bee organizations use that as a body to not be duplicating research at that level. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and the other part of that is that CAPA also produces annually a research report. Now, not everything is included because it's voluntary reporting of the research projects that everybody across Canada who is a CAPA member is doing. But those two things combined give a pretty good picture of what is going on. And so I suggest that if this group wants to sort of have more collaboration, more knowledge of what the other groups are doing, they should request that CAPA makes those public.
It comes down to dollars and cents, doesn't it?
Not in terms of that knowledge, because those reports are produced and can be shared.
More to do with each province investing. At the time we're investing in projects, specifically
Yeah, and this will be the last comment here.
Right, and it's just comment, but
Yeah.
the point is that we have an institution that should be able to lead us along these lines and a reference. I challenge our leadership to use that organization a little better.
Okay, last comment, Rod, and then we're going to move on.
Just to let people know, CAPA does have a tech transfer team committee. We discussed the issue of national coordination earlier this week. So this is relatively new. We also discussed CHC having as Jeremy suggested, some kind of relationship, a liaison position within that tech transfer committee. But given the working group on bee sustainability federally, their top priority is funding tech transfer teams. And so our discussion was how we can do things nationally to provide some stable funding to all tech transfer teams so that nationally they coordinate their research together. As people know, in April 1 of 2023, the federal government has a new 5-year funding program for its programs. So this CAPA Tech Transfer Team is putting together a proposal to bring forward to the CHC by our AGM in January in Newfoundland on how they can coordinate research together and what type of funding they may be looking for.
Thanks for that information, Rod. Okay, let's move on. And Ian, your point was not too straying afar. It actually sets up our next question. When we lose apivar as our standby mite treatment, where do you see beekeepers going? What do beekeepers need from our associations, researchers, industry, and government right now? And we've sort of addressed this, so maybe tack on, starting with Nathan, if you have anything to add to this issue of like, what do you envision the kind of the future of dealing with varroa with apivar compromised future?
I don't know that I have a lot to add on. I think we got some great information this morning, and looking at where we go next when apivar continues to lose efficacy. I am encouraged that we're doing some of the same things in Saskatchewan. We did some resistance testing as much as we could this fall through Jeff Wilson and his office in coordination with MedHat. So we've identified where our problem is and what it is, to what extent we have resistance in Saskatchewan. And Jeff Wilson is a great resource for us. He's working on developing a set of strategies and best management practices for what we do going forward. So next spring, what are our mite treatments going to look like in Saskatchewan? And if anyone wants to tune in next week to Saskatchewan's convention, Jeff will be discussing that in some detail.
Perhaps to stir this up a bit, I mean, I think Ian sort of put it on the table that we've thrown money at this problem. We've done research, and what have we learned? Maybe adding on to this question, what have we learned from our experience of not coming up with solutions? What do we do differently?
Well, admittedly, I wasn't keeping bees when the border was closed in 1987, but if you look at what happened in the years following, we had the very rapid development of things like coumaphos and fluvalinate as treatments for bees. Yes, they have become ineffective, but much like, and I know I'm probably putting a red flag in front of a bull here, much like the issue around COVID and the development of vaccines that emerged afterwards, is that, you know, when we are faced with what looks like insurmountable challenges, somehow we as a society manage to rise to the occasion and find solutions. The loss of amitraz, if it takes place, if the total loss of amitraz takes place, causes us all kinds of sleepless nights. But I'm actually confident that the researchers and the professors and the beekeepers that are out there looking for solutions will find some of these solutions. You know, we already know that we still have effective management through things like oxalic acid treatments. I put Amitraz on on August 20th, and came back 6 weeks later and discovered I had sky high mite loads. Well, what was I going to do? I ended up doing 3 rounds of oxalic acid and dropped my mite loads down. So I still have a solution to it. My point to you is that when these things become ineffective, the answer has always been that we turn to our science and to our society to develop new effective methods. And I'm confident that that will take place, but we just have to believe that, we can't undermine them when we do that. So, will we get there? Yeah, we'll get there. And we already see that in the terms of the development of varroa sensitive hygienic bees. We see that in some of the other research, such as the one that Erica Pletner is doing at Simon Fraser University, which is still years away from actual application and development, being deployed. But there seems to be work being done out there. So, let's not lose hope.
Yeah, I don't know if I have anything else to add on that one. I think we just have to adapt, and I think that oxalic is going to be used quite a bit, especially this next year. I think we have a few challenging years coming up until that next, silver bullet comes. And hopefully Amitraz isn't like a fluvalinate where it's, maybe it'll come back, hopefully. I think that's the one thing we have to hope for. I'll pass to Ian.
I just want to say, I don't really know how to put this, but I just recently had a meeting with our farm agronomist, and we're losing some of our products that we can control flea beetles with in our canola. And we're sitting there wondering, well, what are we supposed to do next to be able to control this problem? Because we know it's going to be a problem. So we're sitting there as farmers trying to figure out, okay, so what's the next thing we can do? All these options are off the table for whatever reason. I don't know why, but they're not going to be available to us. And so we're sitting there thinking, well, we're going to have to use other products, or maybe we're going to have to use products in a different way. What I'm trying to say is the fewer options we have as managers, as farmers, the more risk is put onto us, and the more that we have to deal with our situation ourselves, right? There's a problem. There's no way that we're getting advice to deal with it in an effective way. So what are we supposed to do as producers? We can't take the loss. My question is, like, Amitraz is a very effective product, and beekeepers in a lot of places in the world are using the product in a different way than has been approved here in Canada. And maybe I'm stepping out of my bounds a little bit. Why can't we have this product evolve to catch up to what a lot of other beekeepers are doing with that same product within their hives to manage the issues appropriately? It just doesn't make sense to me why we aren't able to step forward as the problem steps forward, instead of just, okay, that's off the table, we've got to find something else. Right. So I don't know. And, the more I'm dealing with the association, and the more that I'm, being involved with some of this process, the more I realize that this regulatory system is way over my head. And it is something that I had no idea. It's not as simple as, one after next after next. There's this whole process that's got to go through to be able to make things available for farmers to use. But, as a producer sitting here, we need to be able to get these products, and we need to be able to get these products effective and kind of keep up with the problem as it evolves. And I just see there's a complete disconnect between the two. And I think we need to put more attention towards that. So maybe I'll hand it back off to you after saying that.
And that's a frustration that it just keeps amplifying as I am more and more involved with the process of trying to, as I'm trying to put effort towards bringing more products in. And our association is working with our tech transfer program to bring in, some of these ideas and investment and technology in to help us with our varroa mite problem, but or other problems like wax moth or whatever. But is just like a brick wall that we get slammed up against with this regulatory system, and where they will not budge unless certain things are satisfied all the way down the line. And to the point where our industry has very little money to be able to spend, or has very little investment, like private investment, to be able to satisfy some of those requirements, we end up with very little to nothing. And it's a huge problem. It needs to be recognized. We need to be able to step forward. We need the recognition that just because we don't have the ability to satisfy some of those check marks, that things just can't stall and stop and stagnate our industry. We need to be able to find the mechanism to be able to proceed at the same time, meet all the obligations, requirements that keeps everybody safe, and it keeps our food system safe and our stock safe and ourselves safe and everything like that, but at the same time allow us to be able to advance and adopt some of this technology in a little bit more of a fluid manner.
No, that's really good. And it's interesting to think that this kind of problem may be replicated in other industries, that there's a reducing amount of chemistries. There's a kind of like narrowing that we're facing. And this is maybe going to be a real challenge going forward. So I want to transition into a kind of a broader set of questions, which may be, looking at that kind of a problem. And if I was to ask each of you, maybe starting with Nathan, what is the one thing you'd like to see changed or improved with the way your provincial or national association is run? What would you say?
Oh, that's a bigger question than some of the previous ones, I think. Like I said, I'm really pleased with the state of the industry in Saskatchewan. I think our biggest strength has been over the past few years, the collaboration between the entire industry, from members up to the board, the cooperation with our provincial apiculturist, Jeff Wilson, his communication with our tech team lead, Dr. Nasser, and the collaboration with Dr. Simcoe and his beat lab at the Western College of Veterinary Medicine. We're really constantly communicating and moving towards a shared goal. And we've seen some really positive results because of that collaboration. My audit chair for the Saskatchewan board is in the room today, and I think he would answer that question by saying he would like me to spend less money supporting research, because I make his life difficult most of the time. But we are fully committed to bee research in Saskatchewan and moving that forward. I think on the national level, I'd like to start by saying anyone who's a commercial beekeeper in Canada owes a debt of gratitude to the CHC, and in particular, Rod Scarlett. We had 2 years where it looked like we might not get workers here. And I don't know if any of us would have kept our doors open if that happened. And CHC, and in particular, Rod, made that happen for all of us. And so I just want to put that out there and acknowledge that and say thank you to CHC and to Rod. The one thing I do occasionally complain about and voice my opinion about is I would like to see as much energy on the national level focused on a domestic stock replacement program as is focused on bringing bees in from international sources. I think we can do both at the same time, and we have an opportunity to develop something that's working well in Saskatchewan and can support other provinces as well.
Thanks. Boy, that's a loaded question, because of course for British Columbia, because of the demographics that I've explained to you about how we are different from Manitoba, Manitoba, Alberta, and Saskatchewan. I think, where we're going, what we decided as an association, it's no secret that the BCHPA has had for many years a motion on the books approved by our membership that they did not support the reopening of the border to US packages without an adequate risk assessment from CFIA. That remains the case. Having said that, the discussion that has come of late in our association is that if we're going to take that position, then it is incumbent upon us as an organization and as a province to also support the beekeepers across Canada who are impacted by that kind of a decision. So one of the things that our tech transfer program has been looking at doing, and which our sector analysis or sector assessment that's being done by the ministry is probably going to look at very deeply, is how we can increase our stock replacement programs and how we can assist other provinces. And you have in this room as an example one of our beekeepers from Kelowna who supplies every year 1,500 nukes to Alberta and Manitoba, and so we're already doing that. But we recognize that I face as an executive member backlash from our members who really don't want to. We're small scale hobbyists. They don't want to be seen to be. They're proud to not consider themselves to be 2,000 or 10,000 hive beekeepers, which is it means that we face a challenge in our own organization of bringing those beekeepers into the reality that whether you like it or not, there will come a time when the border will likely be reopened. And so how does it look for us? How do we continue to protect the Canadian beekeeping industry? So we're looking forward on that. Where we are from a national perspective is that we also have a lot of respect and support for the Canadian Honey Council. We understand that there's an organization started in Alberta that has a different view about that. And we would like to work collaboratively with the Canadian Beekeepers Federation to figure out ways to resolve some of the outstanding issues. I come from a journalism background, and I spent 40 years as an investigative reporter where conflict was a very constant rule in my work. And I will tell you from my own personal experience that when you have the kinds of issues that you're dealing with now nationally, having a divisive response to that actually doesn't help. It won't solve the problems that we face nationally and provincially as beekeepers. So I would, my view, and our association has taken that view, that we would ask for the CBF to try and work within the existing national framework to achieve some of those goals. We're cognizant of the fact that our fellow beekeepers in other provinces have some really big problems, and we can't be the ones who are standing in the way of finding part of that solution. We have to be part of that solution as well. So I think what you can see from us from a national and provincial position is that we're going to try and start up more of a stock replacement program in British Columbia. Demographically, we don't have the ability to be significant honey producers the way Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba can be. But what we can do is, because of our climate and our geography, is that we have the ability to perhaps add into the national matrix, beekeeping matrix, other things such as stock replacement. And that's perhaps what takes the pressure off of our more eastern fellows.
So I guess for CHC, they have this amazing new member that's starting up right away here. So I expect big things. I think one of the things they always struggle with is, every province has their AGM at a different time, and then an issue comes up, and then they have their AGM at a different time, and I don't have the answer. I don't know how to solve that, how to get around it. I know this was sort of a loaded question because we had to address the CBF and the CHC in that relationship. And I'm glad we're having that conversation. I think it was addressed somewhat at the AGM, and it's something that this year and navigate. And yeah, I guess I'm glad I don't have to be too involved with that. But I guess being on CHC now, I guess I will a little bit. But yeah, hopefully we can keep working together.
Before I hop down a rabbit hole here, could you just kind of rephrase the question for me again?
Yeah, no, that's great. It's if there is one thing that you would like to see changed or improved with the way your provincial and national association is run, what would that one thing be?
And the other question is a new member in the CHC. Could you inform me on that?
Oh, I just got in.
Oh, okay. Well, congrats
Well, I
on
thought
that.
that was public knowledge. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. You know what? I've been doing a lot of bookwork in the last couple of weeks, and I've been watching this convoy commission just on the background on YouTube. So just this very lengthy process going on and this background noise as I'm doing my bookwork here. And I see a lot of parallels that's kind of going on within our little industry here. And I think the impression I get is people aren't being heard, right? And people will go through extraordinary measures sometimes just to be heard, right? And we have to recognize that. We have to be able to hear these voices and then approach the situation in a way that accommodates that. But at the same time, we need solid governance to make sure the majority is protected, right? That's just the way things work. So we have a situation going on within our industry right now that is fracturing our representation, maybe, or perhaps. And it could be very dangerous because we can't fraction our effort as we move forward here. We need to be able to move together in a common direction here because we're fighting for the same thing, just different issues. So I think the trick will be within our industry moving forward is not allowing our industry to be fractured into a whole bunch of different voices, trying to bring us together more so and move forward in a common direction. So, and I guess the trick is going to be, how do we accomplish that? How do we hear those voices? And the voices are loud and they demand to be heard, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't be listening to them. They'd just be a small little fraction on the side, but they represent a lot of beekeepers, and we have to acknowledge that. And I'm just looking at, I'm hearing, maybe Rod could correct me on this, but on this sustainability panel that has been created, can you tell me why they don't have U.S. packaged bees as one of the points to investigate? Or could you maybe fill me in or correct me on that, Rod? And why this is a huge issue for most of Western Canada, and it doesn't seem to be recognized. And just things like this lead to a complete disconnect between beekeepers who view this as the number one issue. So if I could get some feedback on that. Don't mean to put you on the spot, but.
Oh, sure you do.
Too late for that.
Whoops. This is when I called the executive director of the CHC. Didn't mean to call him out, but I put him on the spot on a very controversial topic. Innocent enough on my side, just looking for the answer and conversation around it, but just kind of a dart right into the side. So I won't be expecting another beer from him, I don't think.
There are no specifics in the work plan. And if we put a specific in there, then it really opens the opportunity for other specifics. The work plan there, as it stands right now, does have working at getting borders open for stock. That does not exclude a committee or a working group looking at the United States. It doesn't exclude Italy. It doesn't exclude the Ukraine. It doesn't exclude a number of things. The whole idea of the sustainability plan is broad, and then your specifics come afterwards. And yes, it's a big issue, but it is in there to be addressed.
Okay.
And just
go ahead,
to
Ian.
follow up, I'm looking at our association and the, I guess you can call it the relevance of our association to its members. If we carry on with this fractured divide as we're moving forward like this, the MBA is not going to exist because the members are just going to walk away because half them figure it's not relevant, and the other half can't flip the bill to keep us in business, right? this is a major issue. This is something that we got to tackle. And easy for me to stir the pot on this side of the screen because you can't reach me, but we need this. This is demoralizing our industry. I'm sitting here with the board that's fighting at every meeting. Nobody wants to do the work anymore with all the other activities that's involved because nobody's getting along. Right. And as chairperson, trying to manage through this conflict is very hard. And I'm even thinking to myself, why am I doing this? I have a business to run. I have a business to sustain. I don't have time for this. Somebody's got to be able to look after this. We need answer to this problem if we want to step forward as an industry. This is sustainability as an industry. The buck stops right here. What do we do in an extraordinary condition where we don't have replacement stock to cover our losses? We can't afford to go, we can't 1 year to the next, right? We need to build to keep our businesses solvent. We need bees in these boxes. We need the answers right now. We don't need them yesterday. And I'm just going to back away from what I started there, but I'll hand the mic over to you.
And that's pretty much self-explanatory. I mean, true to the heart. I tell you, that pilot light was lit, and I just let loose a little bit on that because that's the true frustration I am feeling of being part of an association which is divided on a major issue that we can't seem to resolve. And maybe we will never resolve this issue. I don't know. Maybe this is just going to be a perpetuation of the same thing decade after decade. But if I had the answer, then I guess we wouldn't be having the conversation on that.
No, that's great. We're coming up to our final question here, and I'm going to tweak it based on sort of the tenor of the conversation. The question that we did kind of agree on was, have you seen polarizing industry issues affect beekeeper engagement and participation with your provincial association? Now, clearly Ian spoke to this already, and I just maybe as a kind of closing thought, as well as, kind of wrapping your broader thoughts together, is, Ian spoke about the voices that feel that they're not heard, and this may be an opportunity for the growth of Western Canadian beekeeping. It may offer opportunities for change that maybe are needed, but it could also lead to what Ian's describing of people, very talented people in our industry, focusing on their business and not really doing provincial or national level work because it's just, it's insoluble. How do you view this? How do you see, what are the opportunities here for changing how things are going? And, how do you avoid the risks of what I think all the panelists agree to, of things fracturing to a point where it becomes ineffective? Ian, do you want to start us off and then we can go this way again?
Sure. Maybe I'll just touch a little bit on it. There's an old saying, evolve or die, right? In our certain climate, in our certain situation, we need to figure things out ourselves to be able to keep moving forward. So, I spoke a little bit about replacement stock and packaged bees. Unfortunately, that's not the situation right now. So we need to be able to examine other routes to be able to satisfy our requirements to be able to keep in business, right? It doesn't mean we can't take our eye off the ball and other opportunities we can take a hold of, because there's other ones there that we should be examining. But within our own operations, we need to be able to move forward. And Nathan talks a lot about this, is building your own stock. I'm a big believer in that. I mean, as a beekeeper, you'd be stupid not to look into building your own stock. I mean, it makes so much sense just to keep your numbers up and everything. So we need to be spending more time on self-sustainability, hiring out, contracting out. There's Manitoba beekeepers doing it right now. They're farming that work out to BC, where the opportunity is there to build these bees that maybe we need to replace our stock. So as beekeepers, we need to make sure we don't get too narrowed in on certain issues that we can't progress ourselves, and try to adapt and evolve as we move forward collectively. So with that, I'll pass it back on to you.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've always had some good fights in our association over the years, but nothing, I mean, I've always been a huge supporter of the commission, and I encourage everyone to come to the meetings and participate. We sort of find that the ones that ask for the refunds are the ones that never come and never put their name up to support it. So it's one thing I guess you just keep encouraging people to that's the way to make change. Just come to the meetings, let your voice be heard. It was a big year this year for people, talking with their dollars, I guess, asking for their refunds. But at the same time, I encourage all those people to come out to the meetings and let your voice be heard.
You heard that I've been on the board for 10 years. So I came into beekeeping and within a couple of years got dragooned onto the BCHPA board. I'll tell you something that didn't happen in the first 9 years. We didn't have the conversations between the Western associations. It was Ian who actually made the point, why don't we as presidents or as executives start to talk among each other? And so we regularly now have Zoom conversations with Nathan and with Jeremy and with Ian, so that we are actually sharing information and sharing the stresses that we have and what our beekeepers are saying to us. And so between Alberta, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan, they have very similar economic challenges. I've already outlined for you that the fact that BC is geographically and demographically different, but that doesn't mean to say that we don't have the ability to actually figure out how to collaborate with you guys. So in answer to that question about where do we go from here, I think dialogue is good. It never helps if you shut off dialogue, no matter what. If you're angry at each other and you can't talk to each other, you're never going to solve the problem. So the thing is to go and talk to the CBF and say, okay, now that the Alberta Beekeepers Commission has rejected some of your ideas, what can we do otherwise that can help you resolve some of your issues? The issue that Ian faces with his very split and very divided membership, you cannot look at it and say that, well, that's just Manitoba. You have to say that's going to happen. If it is not already happening, it's already happening in Alberta and Saskatchewan and in British Columbia. So we're all in this together. And so, listening and being willing to make changes that can perhaps assist, may not help me directly, but it may help the other folks around me. So, I go back to that belief that the national organization, a CHC, it is our national representation. Now, if there are issues at the CHC level that need to be resolved and they need to do a better job, then that's what we collectively take to them and say, you need to do a better job. I think that's my message here is that we do this collectively and not try and balkanize and divide and separate and ask for our refunds and try and weaken the structures that we have as an organization together.
It's hard to kind of be the last person speaking about this because I got three really smart guys in front of me.
Not really.
I think I want to echo what Jeff said in terms of acknowledging Ian in getting the Western provincial heads together and having some conversations, because it had been something that had been talked about before, but no one had taken the initiative to get us sitting down on a Zoom call and having some conversations, not always easy ones, but having conversations. And I think that's the key moving forward. There's lots of things we can disagree about, but I think one thing, or at least I hope one thing that we can all agree about, is that we have a bee health problem in Canada. And if we use that as our lens, as the foundation of guiding the decisions that we're making and how we're moving forward as individual producers and as provincial associations and on a national basis, I think then we're moving in the right direction if we always keep bee health in our vision. It doesn't matter where bees come from or how cheap you get them or how many you throw in the boxes. If we don't solve bee health as a fundamental problem in the Canadian industry, none of that matters where we get our bees from and how many of them we get, because we still have the same problem. And so I think finding the commonalities and agreeing that there is some direction that we can all get behind is going to take us forward. And as everyone else said, we're going to get there a lot faster working together than working in competition or against each other.
Well, thank you very much. Let's have a round of applause for our panelists. And I really have to say personally, found this the conversations I've been having around here, around these topics, fascinating, and just it's great to see all the initiatives that are going forward in such a difficult time. Ron has held up the 5-minute mark. Are there any questions from the floor or points from the floor? Please come on up.
My name is Kelly O'Day. I'm from Kona Queen, and we supply queens to a lot of the beekeepers here.
Oh, just can you move it up from the Shelley Hoover Heights to?
That way I don't have to stoop. Okay, so is there anything that can be done? Prior to COVID, we had a very good network of shipping, and it seems to me that one of the easy, or I shouldn't say easy, but first things that we can focus on is taking advantage of what we have. And we produce a lot of queens, and I have a saying, a dead queen is better than a damaged queen, because if you guys do all this work of these splits and you're trying to replace your stock, and I can't get you a quality queen, when I let go of it, I have confidence it's quality, but getting it to you is a terrible job these days. And we do everything we can to make that happen, but there used to be a beautiful system with Air Canada, and we just can't get anywhere with it. We're using FedEx, UPS. If there's anything that the associations or the governmental agencies can do to get something solidified for a good shipping channel, we can get you more queens. Not a lot more, but the ones that we're sending, we want them to be the best that they can be. And then I'd like to address the package B situation in the US. I'm afraid the supply is not there that you're hoping for. It could be over time, I would imagine, but we have the exact same problems that you have, probably worse at this time. And so we're doing everything we can do to supply ourselves, and we want to supply Canada. And I see this industry as a North American industry, not US and Canada separate. And if we can bridge these gaps and the US and Canada can work together, that's also something that could help. But it's many small things, and I wish I had the answers, but shipping is a problem. I know it's a problem for you with packages from these other countries. It's a problem for us getting a quality queen to you, and we really need to focus together on these issues, and it's really hard to cut through the red tape. And I don't have the answers, but I wanted to point that problem out as the supply may not be there for these packages, because the one advantage is you do have a slightly later season. We have an earlier season for the development of our bees, but we're still limited. And somehow, if we can work together, we can gradually build that supply. But it's, the hobbyists, I believe, are sucking up a lot of the packages that are out there. There probably are some opportunities to buy bees coming out of the almonds if the border were opened. That's one option that people might look at. And we're all in this together, and we're all facing the same issues, but that freight issue is a real problem.
So Kelly, it's Jeff here. Thank you for pointing that out. I mean, there's a longer discussion to be had about the actual support and availability of packages from the US. But I want to point out, and everybody I'm sure in this room who's been a beekeeper for a while will remember how Kona Queens was a part of the solution to a problem. And my point here is that a number of years ago, when it became apparent that the Canadian system was going to ban the import of queens from Hawaii because of problems with varroa mites, Medhat Nass, who was the provincial apiculturalist here, went to Gus in Kona and worked with him to reevaluate how to properly ship bees that would reduce the risk. So they went from battery boxes to caged attendants. And it was that collaboration which allowed for the resumption of importation of up to 250,000 queens, I think, that come into Canada from Kona. So it is, and it was through the issues of, using the co-op and a few other, but it was a collaborative arrangement. And so the point that I'm trying to make here is that as you talk about these challenges that we face, it does us well to look at the fact that in the past, something as simple as trying to get queens from Hawaii was resolved through collaboration, and it was ingenuity on the part of Canadian apiculturalists and beekeepers and the suppliers in Hawaii that actually managed to make that happen.
Okay, we're coming close to the end. Let's get some quick responses. I can see you reach for the mic. I saw Nathan grab for the mic. Let's get some quick responses, and maybe Ian has some too.
I'll just be quick. Thanks for bringing that up. I know.
Oh, just got to hold it closer. Getting the packages, the transportation issue sort of gets more of the headlines, but I know I experienced it this year. It's a big concern for me is that transportation of queens. And I think it's something that we have to keep pushing to address and find solutions.
I don't necessarily have a lot to add, so I'm going to, in the interest of time, just give Ian an opportunity to see if he wants to add on to this discussion or conversation.
This maybe underlies the importance of having a strong representing body like the CHC, where we have issues like this, has just been explained, that need addressing. And as an individual beekeeper like myself, what am I supposed to do about that, right? I can't. It's beyond me. So we need the representing associated efforts to provide direction, to be able to get the research needed into that, to get kind of the systems figured out if there is a deficit there, right? This is where it's all important. This is everybody sitting in this room right now talking about these issues. This is what it is, a collective effort to identify these issues to make us better beekeepers. So this is why I'm a very strong believer in associated effort on a provincial scale, on a national scale, because we have our place. We can amplify our voice to where it needs to be spoken to be able to solve these issues. So that's what I wanted to say there.
And that tone is something I seriously believe in, and that's why I'm part of the association, because I believe in associated effort. I believe in representation. I believe in the process to be able to deal with issues, to manage affairs and all that. And this extends past the Beekeeping Association. This goes straight into our society and politics and governance and laws and everything like that. And every single time that I see somebody attacking our system of societal management, the way we have it set up now, or trying to erode at the confidence of our systems put into place to be able to manage our issues and help us all move forward together as a collective individual, as a country or whatever, as society, as a democracy. I will push back on that every time, regardless of who it is, regardless, even if it's part of my own party or, a fraction within my belief system. I will push back on that every time to maintain what we have here, to make sure that we are protected and to make sure that we are able to move forward without fear of persecution or what do we see in other countries. So, at any rate, that's just, the tone that I try to convey as I am trying to collaborate with others to be able to make the system work. And that's what it's all about. So that was quite the opportunity to be able to speak. I'm glad they reached out and made the extended effort to involve my participation through Zoom. That's one thing COVID has provided us, a silver lining, as it's forced us to adopt technology to help us manage our business. And being part of the association, I don't think I could have got near as much work done or reached out to near as many beekeepers if it wasn't for this forced transition into the electronic world Like I'm so busy on the farm, I don't have time to go drive off to meetings and burn a day. I can sit down, have a meeting, take care of business, or touch base with more beekeepers on a continual basis to get things done while maintaining my own business. And here, because life interrupted me with my household sewer problem, I was still able to reach out to beekeepers and communicate and participate in this discussion. All the same, it's not the same as being in front. It's not the same, the social aspect of being in front of the person, talking to them face to face, interacting with the crowd, observing the reflection of what I'm saying from the crowd coming back. There's a disconnect, and I appreciate that. But at the same time, I can appreciate that we can still take that step forward by using the tools available to help us manage that. And I guess in a way, that's the way I'm looking at our honeybee industry, is we need to be able to do the same, just push progress and adopt some of these technologies to be able to help us with our business a little bit more effectively. So with that, I hope the ABC doesn't mind me putting this on my YouTube channel. I guess if I get an angry email, I'll pull it down. But I think this conversation is extremely important, and I'd like just my own self-serving nature here to provide that conversation to beekeepers across the country to see what the conversation's all about. Maybe tap into some of that industry perspective and just indulge ourselves into the conversation, whichever way you want to lay on that issue. Just try to engage in a civil manner and see where we can steer this ship.
I want to thank all the panelists again. For all their contributions here. Like I'm an avid reader, and the one thing that struck me one day, I was reading some quotes from different individuals, and I never was a big fan of Desmond Tutu, but he did sit there and say, look, if you want peace, you got to talk to your enemies. And for too long, I know that we've been working independently as provinces, and we haven't realized the partnership that we actually have. I think the most beneficial part of this forum here today has been we're starting to listen to each other, and we're starting to talk, and we're starting to work through some of the problems and realizing that we're not all just alone. So if you're with me one more time, let's thank all the panelists and Adoni for celebrating this. I've got a lovely parting gift for each of you guys and for your contributions. Thank you very, very much. I believe it's now Nathan. And then Ian, I got one here for you as well. But
we'll put it in the silent auction tonight.